Welcome, First Movers, to another transformational In Conversation. I'm Yasmin London, joined by the incredible Cassie Roma. And every episode of First Movers, we focus on exploring the lived wisdom, the strategies, and the human stories of the people in the world who move first. Those who shape culture, challenge norms, and build futures that look very different to the past. Cass?
Oh, thank goodness for that. Today's first mover is a treat. She's someone whose story has reshaped the world's understanding of resilience, humanity, and peace. On the 7th of July, 2005, Gill Hicks survived the London bombings. She lost her legs, she lost her breath, she lost the world she knew, but what she never lost and what she rebuilt with extraordinary intention was her belief in humanity. Her life sense has become a masterclass in restoration, meaning-making, and the kind of leadership that emerges only after the unthinkable. And wow, I've got chills just introducing you. Gill, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful introduction as well.
Oh, gosh, what a privilege to have you with us. I have to say, Gill, I've known you for a little while, but you actually spoke at my wife's conference a couple of years ago, and I have never heard people just froth so much over a speaker. They just thought you were incredible. She came home and just did not stop talking about the power that you had as a speaker and a storyteller.
But it matters, right? You know, have the privilege of a stage. That is something that really I hold every single time that I'm in front of an audience, that this matters. And I always say the same little mantra before I step on that stage, which is, please let the right words land in the right ears. Then I know that my job is fulfilled. So thank you for that feedback, because it really matters.
Yeah, well, I mean, not only are you an incredible storyteller, but your story is unique and powerful and captures, I guess, the hearts and minds of people, not just because of what happened, but because of the life that you've built, the second life that you have built afterwards. But before we do delve into that, I wanted to rewind a little bit, something that we do in all of our interviews, to find out a bit about what you were like as a kid. What was your childhood like? What shaped the person that you are today?
You're hiding your face already.
So I grew up in South Australia. I was born just in a beach suburb here in beautiful South Australia, and my heritage is my mother was from Scotland, and my father was from a mix of Cornish and Spanish parents. So I got the sort of the more Scottish dose of skin, and so I remember vividly spending most of my childhood just really dealing with blisters from our very harsh summer sun, and always feeling like I was a rubbish Australian and didn't fit in at all. So whether there's something psychologically that I can explore, I'm almost scared to open up that can of worms, and I just sort of gloss over it. But I remember always feeling I was a very old child. So I remember feeling that I was desperate to just reach the age of where I felt mentally. And so that was a kind of interesting space, because I'd always wanted to be an artist. I always wanted to communicate through art, whether that be through music or through visual arts. And I remember my father being very, very clear to say, no. You are not to pursue an arts career. You will never make any money if you're any good. You know, it's only dead artists that really rise to any fame. And I was like, my God, that's quite harsh. And I was brought up by a beautiful mother who and I say this in the most wonderful way, but she had an innocence about her that I now, at the time, made me crazy, because I wanted her to switch on, but I now respect, upon reflection, as a very quiet strength and a real beauty to her nature. I'm the product of two very different people brought up in Australia. Yeah, kind of the freedom of a childhood that you can imagine growing up in a country at the time that had, again, this beautiful naivety, this beautiful sense of freedom, and particularly around a beachside suburb, there is a freedom to that that is just like no other. And it's funny because when I left Australia, so my parents died a year apart from each other, and I was sort of 17, 18, and I left
Wow.
Australia purely on that sense of and I laugh now when I think about it, but that sense of I need to go and find myself. And isn't it interesting when you're of that age that you feel you need to go away to find out who you are, but actually who you are is inside of you.
Yeah.
But that sense to me of again, being brought up in this beautiful place, feeling that actually it's probably a little too safe for me to really test, my boundaries and my abilities. And so there I was at Adelaide Airport having, and I'll say this as long as no one ever repeats it back to me, but I'd never been on a plane before. I'd never been to Sydney or Melbourne. I'd never been to the kind of bigger cities in Australia. And I remember my friends and my family sort of saying, "What are you doing? Why are you going to London? You don't know anyone." But I just felt that pull of needing to really test the parameters, and that being born into such a beautiful environment didn't back then didn't give me the ability to test those boundaries.
It's so interesting listening to you talk because there's so many elements of your childhood. You had this innate sense of maturity that you wanted to be older than your chronological age, but yet a naivety and a free spirit style nature, but also the courage to do something incredibly brave like that, to get on a plane, to go over to a country you didn't know without having a security blanket to find yourself. When you look back now, were there any sort of early threads, some values or instincts or impulses that feel connected to the work that you've eventually sort of stepped into? Like for me, listening to you speak, those are the connections I can make. What
Yeah.
do you make out of those early threads?
So it's interesting because I don't feel that it was courageous, because I think this is the wonderful shielding of naivety, but also that ability to really hear the inner voice within you that is speaks so loudly that it drowns out any moment of fear of the unknown. That the unknown and that drastic change, deliberate change, for me then was a sense of necessity, of I am creating my future. I am in control of unwanted change, and the unwanted change being the anchors that my parents represented. So had that been a different story, had that been my parents were still alive, I don't think I would have ever left, So in many ways I've looked at death as a catalyst for change. And I was privileged to be with my mum when she passed away, and the power of watching someone's life end as you hold their hand.
Yeah.
And she was only in her early 50s, and I looked at this beautiful woman and I just thought, is that life? Is that it? There must be more.
Yeah.
And so for that sense of purpose and really wanting to go and see what's out there, I do think that has been a strong current throughout all of my life of what else is there? What more is there? What is this life that we're in? And equally also being very, very, very aware that it's just this little tiny wedge of time that we're given. And in that little tiny wedge of time, what are we doing?
Yeah.
That acknowledgement that we will end, I believe, should be enough motivation for all of us to live on the edge of our seats, leaning in, saying, great, rolling my sleeves up, what are we doing? And if this doesn't work, then I need to be nimble and agile to do something else because I've got this little wedge of time.
Absolutely.
I love that. I love the acknowledgement of our innate humanity, which comes with that as death, as being a catalyst for change. As you were saying that, I was on the edge of my seat and leaning in because same girl, same. Like the times in which I've held hands and watched that spirit, that energy leave, it's always been okay, make that decision that's been hard to make, do the thing. That's beautiful. Tell us about your time then leading into getting to London, your life there, all of those things. And then for listeners who might not know your story, how do you describe what happened then on July 7th, 2005 to others?
So what I love about, particularly with London, so anyone that knows and has experienced commuting in London, in particularly in the underground, knows that there is an unwritten rule and an unwritten etiquette where you're not allowed to look at anyone in the eyes. You're not allowed to speak to anyone. So it's silent choreography of everybody knowing exactly where they're meant to be placed. And when you're a traveler or a tourist, you really jar in that system because it is so beautifully designed. And when I first got to London, I was that Aussie girl, sort of wanting to connect and sort of saying to people, "Hi, my name's Gill. I'm looking for work." Remember watching people just move away from me, and I thought, "Oh no, my whole plan is disintegrating." And then it's amazing how quickly I became a Londoner. And how quickly I lived in the UK for, 25 years, but how quickly I became one of those people. And dare I say, even was frustrated at a tourist that was, in my alignment. Like, really? Don't you know this is our commuting time? And I think for me, July the 7th is just, it's one of those days where if I rewind the tape, there's all these increments of time that if I was just, 5 minutes later doing this or 3 minutes doing that, it would have adjusted the whole trajectory of that day. And so that's also, if I look at it from a philosophical point of view, it's given me a real respect for the difference a minute can make. So it's given me a different respect for the tiny moments of time that we often, disregard. But now I'm savor those moments because they made a difference for me. And, I think what's also been interesting, if I relay the day, it's looking at CCTV footage and seeing me board exactly the same train carriage at exactly the same time as what we now know was a 19-year-old suicide bomber, and what we now know was part of a coordinated attack on London commuters. And there's several frustrations for me. I used to be a workaholic. I was someone that didn't understand that, I guess I got sucked into the system of believing that I was making a difference by spending the hours at the desk. So being at my desk at 7:30 every morning, being the last to leave at 10:30 every evening. And I thought that that was, imperative to getting on, to being to being someone that's really making a difference in their career. If I could go back to that version of Jill now, I would absolutely say you've got to live. You've got to be out there experiencing things because that makes you a better leader. That makes you a better colleague because you've got more that you're exposed to. You've got more that you're understanding. However, I didn't know that then, and it was this one day, so just one Thursday morning that I was out of my scheduled time and I was running late, and they're the things that are, I won't say infuriating, but they're the things that I kind of note to say, what was it that is just this one day, and my life
Mm.
changed completely in that carriage. And the things that I would change again is that I did become that Londoner that didn't speak to my fellow colleague, the commuters.
Mm.
And I wish I'd looked up, because the
Yeah.
one man that stood between me and the bomber, he died with the direct force of the bomb. I now know that his name was Adrian. I know his mother, his father, his sister, his wife, his children, and I just wish I'd said good morning, and how significant his life has been for
Mm.
me to continue. And I think about Adrian every single day. I talk to Adrian. I say, Adrian, I'm doing this. I'm doing that. He's a big part of my life, because he has taught me my very first lesson in how important a stranger beside you can save your life. And it was just a breath. It was just a breath. There was no loud noise. There was no warning. It was just a breath. And we were plunged into a darkness that the only way I've ever been able to describe that is it's like a tangible darkness, because it's something that's not just like the lights being turned out. It's like your body is held by something, and the
Mm.
speed is so surreal that there was no understanding of what's happened. And it was an hour that we were in this space of this darkness. And again, what really took to me was that that our hands all went out to reach out to each other, and that
Mm.
those hardened commuters, anonymous commuters, became essential lifelines. And what
Mm.
mattered to us in that hour wasn't just my own survival, it was the collective survival. It was
Mm.
not questioning what had happened, but really questioning, how do we get out of this? How do we keep each other alive? It was extraordinary. And I guess it's those moments of me being given the insight of who we really are
Mm.
that has been the seat and the core to my growth and my purpose ever since.
Oh, that is
That,
that's thank you. Thank you for sharing. I'm holding back my tears right now because
same.
everything that you're
Same.
saying around the idea of connectedness and the reaching out and, living in the world we live in now where this kind of almost reckless individualism happens. Like you said, it takes that moment of tangible darkness to reach out for the commuters that, you had the unspoken rules with.
Mm.
I read that when you were taken to the hospital, once the emergency services came, you were called one unknown. And, it's that idea of caring for you simply because of your humanity. What did that reveal to you about connection and compassion?
Look, it's extraordinary. I look at that wristband, and it said one unknown, estimated female.
Wow.
And so I remember looking at those 4 words, and just, firstly, it revealed just what state my body must have been in.
Mm.
And
Mm.
then the wave of secondary feeling for me was just how loved I was, how much
Mm.
respect and love and intention to live my body was held in. And that
Mm.
Mm.
each single person that put their own lives at risk to save mine did so with me being one unknown, estimated female. And that, I was overwhelmed by that, because first there was the sense of connectiveness in the carriage, but then there was this other, and that was the
Mm.
feeling of everybody that held me with such respect and intention. And there's a beautiful story about my identity being found, and it came from a senior detective called James. And James was told, look, we don't hold out much hope for this person surviving, so you need to find an identity so we can get
Mm.
next of kin. And James tells me the story that he came into the cubicle I was in and said, right, okay, if this person can blink, I'm going to go through the alphabet, and they can blink their name, as I go through the alphabet. And
Wow.
that's how they found that I was Gill Hicks. And when I met James and he was telling me the story, I sort of had to use a little bit of my humor to say, so James, like, what's protocol for a hyphenated name? Like, how would I? What if I
Double
was
barreled.
or, yeah, a long surname? And he's just like, oh, you're a nightmare.
Gosh, it's a long blink, maybe. Oh,
But I was curious, like, well, like, what happens at what point do you go forget it? Just call her Jane Doe or call him Jim Doe or
oh.
whatever. Look, it's been an extraordinary label to have, and I think it is a stark reminder of our shared humanity and how that must be. It must be that the thing that keeps us connected as one people rather than the difference of many.
Yeah, it's so important that we focus on that connectedness, on our universal truths as a human race and what bonds us together. And I was reading about your comments of feeling quite euphoric, I guess, and a deep sense of gratitude to the Jameses of the world, the first responders. What did those moments, even those lovely interactions like you've just shared with us about James, what did it teach you about that intersection of survival, but the next phase of possibility?
Yeah, it's an interesting one to ponder, and I think I've spent 20 years really trying to understand it. Because when I've gathered that community together, I remember wanting to reach out to meet every single one of those people that saved my life. And there was this universal humble sort of response of, look, I was just doing my job. I don't need any thanks. Are you serious? You are the role models. I have to rebuild my life here. And I've had to rebuild my life from an action of absolute destructive hatred. How do I do that? How do I rebuild and not have any sense of wanting retribution or bitterness? And so I hailed them as my role models, but I desperately wanted to hold them as well as they had held me.
Yeah.
So I created a club, and I just put the word out to say, look, on the last Friday of every month, this is my address. My front door will be open. I have a fully stocked bar. Turn up. And they did. And that went on for 7 years until we became
Wow.
a firm
Wow.
family. And that's what I call them today, that they are my family.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And again, reflecting on the regularity of Adrian in your life and the connection to his family as well. I imagine that is an incredibly powerful element to have in your life. But going through something like that, where nobody else can quite understand what you've been through, it's critical to have those people in your life, especially as you sort of move on to life number two. Those weeks and months afterwards, those years afterwards, where you had to rebuild. What did life number two look like? How did you get past the, I imagine, intense want for revenge, retribution, anger, all of the emotions? How did you move into life number two?
So amazingly, that was never there. The moment I woke up and realized that in my mind, I was still Jill, and I was lost the ability to speak. And so it took me probably 4 months to learn how to speak again. I've lost a lot of my hearing. I have one functional lung, apart from losing legs. But I remember being very conscious that I was still Jill. And I was desperate to be able to show the medical team and everyone that, look, inside here, there's a person that I love joking around and I love doing this and I love doing that, but I couldn't speak. So there was a sense of euphoria that I was alive and that I was still me. And so everything then was this little increment of learning how to be this new physical being whilst marrying it up with who I still was. And so it's trying to find those threads of the who you were knitting into who you're becoming. And who I was becoming was absolutely born from this intense feeling that I was privileged to know who we are,
Mm.
who we really are,
Mm.
who
Yeah.
humanity is. It was like, wow, I get to know that. Then there was this great moment where the prosthetist, and I didn't even know what a prosthetist was before, I'd never met an amputee. I didn't know anything about it. And this wonderful man walked into my room and he sounded exactly like David Attenborough. And he said, "Now, my dear, I want you just to pop your arms out so I can measure you for your first prosthesis." And I thought, "Why do I have to pop my
Wow.
arms out?" He said, "Well, look, I have to measure you because you're the height of your arms, you are the height of your arm span." And I was just, okay, there has to be an opportunity in adversity. And because I used to be like Kylie Minogue, literally, I was her height, I was tiny. And I thought, there was an opportunity here, but I've got to be calm, I've got to be focused, and I've got to seize the moment. So I just said, perhaps I could be a lot taller than I used to be. And they don't advise that, because they do advise starting to learn to walk being shorter so that you get to
Center of
understand your center
gravity.
of gravity. Yep.
Mm.
And I went, no, 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 no. So I used to be maybe 5 foot, and I ended up being 5'8".
I love
Was
this. Yes.
fantastic. And what I love about that whole process and moment is that I was allowed to own my change,
Mm.
and
Mm.
that psychologically changed the way I stepped into a very different second life. That
Mm.
posture, that ownership was, this is me, this is mine, I'm owning
Mm.
it, and now I get to create. So how often do any of us get to start again?
Mm.
Literally start again. And that
Wow.
is how I was able to view those days and months and indeed years after July the 7th, 2005.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. In in that time that followed, when you had time to think on it and were leaning into things like the love, the compassion, the intention, all of that, ending cycles of conflict and things like this is very intentional on a macro level and on a micro. What is your intention bent around helping people to, I guess, get to that ending of cyclical conflict or whatever that looks like, to apply to their everyday life these ideals, this connection, this humanity, this thing that you learned out of something
Mm.
wholly I guess unexpected and just horrid.
Look, I think it's a very difficult problem to solve from a macro level. So I'm
Mm.
therefore interested in, from a hundreds and millions of micro level, of how that can influence the macro. I feel convinced that if we can find individual confidence for the other, for difference, and
Mm.
that our confidence allows us to have the tough conversations around difference,
Mm.
to ask why someone may think and have an opinion about something that is very different than what we
Mm.
hold, but we then are able confidently in our humanity to say, how fascinating, that's what you think.
Mm.
But we were able to then greet each other as human beings first, to be fascinated by the difference of belief, and then to move forward together, being able to respect those differences and to not feel that we need to kill or destroy each other based on those beliefs. Now, that is a big ask, but it's something
Mm.
that I feel confident in
Mm.
being able to speak about. I've done a lot of work. So one of the incredible projects that I did only 2 years after the bombing was to go to the place where three of the bombers had come from in the UK, which is a
Wow.
town called Leeds. And because
Mhm.
that town was devastated, clearly, and to be able to work with the community to say, how do we unify around this? What can we do? And for me to say, well, actually, what if I walk on prosthetic legs from Leeds down to London. And we went
Wow.
through 22 towns and cities, and it wasn't to raise money, but it was to bring people who believed that they had opposing ideas. And it was saying, you know what? Let's walk and just talk together. That was extraordinary, bearing witness to thousands of conversations of people being able to find their commonality, almost as those epiphany moments where they've come together, they've walked, they're in disagreement, and then if they're talking enough, they'll find their moment that unites them. And that was extraordinary to be able to bear witness and to be involved with and be the catalyst for those sorts of very important, rich, deep conversations, and conversations that, change lives. There was one young boy that was 14 that was talking to me, and he said, he was agreeing with the actions of extremism. And I sort of was able to be able to say to him, look, what's important if you want to change the world is to be alive to make those changes, and to get involved in things where you can be heard and you can voice your opinions. And he's now a politician in the UK. It's
Wow.
sensational.
Wow.
Do you think, Jill, that these are teachable skills? Because I'm just imagining what that conversation must have been like as emotionally balanced as you are a person who is a victim of that level of extremism, and your intention to teach is so strong. But do you think that everybody's capable of having a conversation like that ultimately? Like, what skills do we need to have as human beings to hold that in a balanced way, to not become overly emotional, to be open and curious to another person's point of view, and to have a constructive conversation out of it? What does that take?
I think this is the $1,000,000 question, really, isn't it? That governments, societies worldwide ask themselves. For me, I think it's about us as a collective having a hierarchy of value, to value our lives as the top of our pyramid, and to value our time here, to as human beings to live in the knowledge that we end. So what is the purpose of our lives? And how can we therefore disregard and let fall away all the things that really don't matter? So the points and the triggers that cause road rage, the points and the triggers that lead us to feel that we have to be solid in our ground of opinion because that's what matters. In fact, if we were able to find an evolution where we can rise above and acknowledge that we are all here on this one planet, and we're all here on this one planet for this little wedge of time. So what actually matters? What matters is that we're all caretakers. What matters is that we're all caretakers of the place on the planet that we're in, that we all have this. When it comes down to it, it's the similarities that thread through all of us is actually quite profound. That the similarities that most people worry about is their safety, their family, the future for their children.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, it's such a perfect segue, because looking at different research, people who have experienced trauma like you, there are a lot of comments around having a deeper sense of purpose and a real focus on stronger relationships. And I wanted to ask you about what becoming a mother to your beautiful Amelie did in terms of expanding your understanding of legacy, and I guess the responsibility that comes with a second chance at life too.
Look, it's everything. I remember in the carriage, so I was hovering between life and death, and again, a profound experience of that of the vow, and the vow being that if I get to survive, I will lead a life that is absolutely about making a difference, that is absolutely about sharing these insights and learnings for the greater good. That's it. That's my new signed contract. So I've always wanted to be a mum. I thought that that was something that perhaps isn't going to be gifted to me because I have a different purpose. So I remember asking, can being a mum be in the same contract? Is there like small print that I can add in because of course, not that it's a distraction from the purpose, but it is a devotion of your life when you're a parent in a
Yes.
completely different way. And she is everything to me. She is the most extraordinary little person. But of course, she's been brought up, with a mother that is different herself. So
Mm.
it's not handing the baton, but it's watching her develop. She's now 12. It's watching her develop in a world where she's been involved with me in everything I've been doing ever since she was a baby in a carry capsule. So she's, been involved in different communities, in different language groups, everything. She's been exposed to everything. And it's been watching her develop her own ideas of the world through being exposed to what she has with me, and that's been extraordinary. Plus, she was christened by all of the rescuers, so they're all her god family. So again, she's just,
Wow.
Oh,
Gosh.
that's beautiful. We are all mothers of daughters, it seems. What do
Yes.
you see in the way that she sees the world that fills you with hope?
She's incredibly wise for her age. She's deeply committed to caring for the planet, which I love. Quite often I've got sort of a hovering. So just to sort of place what I'm about to say, when I was on the walk from Leeds to London, of course, as you can imagine, it was not easy. It was a lot of pain
Mm.
balancing, walking on two prosthetic legs. So there were some expletives on the journey. And I remember
God.
people joining the journey go, "We didn't think you'd swear. We thought you'd be a lot more like, a Mother Teresa type figure." And I remember saying, "Look, this is peace. It is tough.
Yeah.
It is absolutely making the choices that this ends with me. Everything's about a choice." So, look, I'm a very passionate, sometimes heated character. And so what I've witnessed in my daughter is this calming influence. And this is where I kind of smile because her wisdom is beyond her years. And she'll often say, "Mum, deep breaths, calm." And I just feel like, when does the teacher become the student? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
my relationship with her, that she teaches me perspective, and I
Yeah.
value that.
Mm.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Fast forwarding a little bit to, we talked about your roots being in art and creativity and that kind of connection. And what you seem to be doing now focuses on combating violent extremism. Can you share a bit about what you're doing now with us, please?
Yeah, so I've always kept this beautiful acronym, which is MAD. And MAD it fits everything for me because it's MAD, which is the acronym for making a difference. But I like it
Mm.
that be angry enough to do
Mm.
things that matter. Be
Yeah.
angry enough to want to make some changes. Be angry enough to sit at the edge of your seat and say, I actually want to live forever, but I'm not going to. So I'm going to be angry enough to be positive, to turn that into positive
Yeah.
intention and positive anger.
Yeah.
So for me, it's continuously trying to find language points that reach people. And that's
Mm.
what I love the most about the arts. And I didn't realize that my life, it's not kind of full circle, but it's
Mm.
coming back to complete the circle with a whole different purpose and a whole different sensitivity around the power of the arts. And that's what
Mm.
I love about being, first and foremost, an artist. I've created the MAD creative agency, and I like that because it's about making a difference, that everything has to have that lens of,
Mm.
who is this for? What are we saying? Why does it
Yes.
matter? Who is it for? What are we saying? And why does that matter? And it's coming to things where people can take their time to either hear a piece of music for them to move, to witness a piece of visual art for them to move, to think about something in a different way. And that's
Mm.
all my intention of
Mm.
just, firstly, for us to find our individual posture and confidence, to not fear the other, but to look at the
Hmm.
other as a possible lifeline, and to be able to grow and evolve and to find our place in the world where we can be making that difference. Each of us
Great.
can be making that difference.
I love it. It sounds like the entire ethos, that through thread of what you're doing is breaking down that us versus them binary and saying, this art is not us versus them, me versus you. It's all of us in it together. And you can go towards the thing that moves you the most. You can figure out what that means to you and how it touches you. And we can all be in it together and share this common experience in our own individual and unique ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about not being distracted.
Mm.
Being the
Mm,
arts gives us the time to take that breath, to not be distracted, and to really remind ourselves what matters.
Mm.
My life
yeah.
matters. Our lives matter. Our planet matters. Where we live matters. So how do I contribute to that? How do I contribute to my health, to my mind
Mm.
health, to my body
Mm.
health? They're the things that matters. So it's been an absolute re-intention
Mm.
of using the arts for direct messaging.
I think that's such a beautiful way of framing it. I think a lot of the time, and there may be even listeners listening in today that think that the arts are nice and, it's lovely to go to a gallery and, absorb, the messages that people are putting out there. But gosh, the arts, when we open our hearts and minds, are so powerful, and we are human beings, not human doings. And we've got to lean more into what sets our souls on fire in so many
Yeah.
ways. And I think before we even started this conversation, we were talking about how people can be dismissive of the arts. But, your work is the opposite of that. It is powerful. It is funneling stories and messages and missions that connects to the hearts and minds of everybody. How do you see your artwork helping connect or reconnect people to the truth that we are all, I guess, one unknown to someone? How do you connect the dots there?
I don't think I can. I think that my job is creating the platform
Mm.
for
Mm,
the person to arrive at their meaning.
Mm.
So one of the most powerful symbols that I've created is based on a poppy. And I love the symbolic idea of a poppy because it's about beauty growing from adverse conditions, beauty
Mm.
growing in the most horrific times. But the way I've done this particular piece has been through looking at the individual. And so that interpretation is for the viewer. That
Mm.
interpretation is for someone to arrive at. And that might take, a moment. It might take, years. It's been
Mhm.
really interesting actually having emails or notes given to me
Mhm.
years afterwards from someone that's been moved by something. And it's helped me sort of, because I'm terribly impatient. Okay. So I love just a note, tick, 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 tick.
Preaching to the choir here.
I'm one of those people that, I need everything done and I need to know it's all in a neat box and that's achieved. And I've had to let go of that to say, put things out, just put things
Yeah.
out in the world. And again, coming back to that beautiful idea of the right ears will hear the right words when they're
mm,
Mm.
meant to. The right
Yeah.
eyes will see the right images when they're meant to. And I've got to just be patient and keep putting things out and keep
Mm.
changing the dial on the channel and the frequency and just trust that people will find the frequency when they're meant
Mm.
to find the frequency. And that's been one of the hardest things, I
Mm.
think, of this second life, to be able to trust and to let go. It's been,
Yeah,
yeah, a real test.
to have faith,
It's the
isn't it?
Yeah.
art of surrender, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
So
especially when
much.
you're wired in a way that,
Uh,
I still can't take the workaholic out of it. It's just like,
No,
okay, you
no.
can
mhm.
do that in a kind of this framework.
Feel like it's one of those things we say
And
at First Movers. It's about being a work in progress on purpose, and
Mhm.
I absolutely know what you mean about being that sort of workaholic, that sense of achievement, and
yeah,
trying to control the outcome because that's what life has taught us, and that transition into that next phase of
yes,
letting go, letting the universe do what you've, I guess, manifested or put out to it as well, and having that trust that good will overcome and the right thing will
yeah.
happen. Now, one of the
And
things we do, go, Jill.
no, I was just it just reminded me of when we've talked about peace and that I guess the greatest achievement, isn't it, really, is to be able to find your peace. And
Hmm.
we're talking about letting go and having trust and just putting things out. It's finding that sense that I can be at peace, and maybe that
Hmm.
Mm.
is the greatest achievement of all.
Absolutely, absolutely. Contentment and peace.
Yeah,
Those are things that don't come up enough in our busy, hectic lives, and that's the ultimate, isn't it? It's
it
it's
is.
it's
Yeah.
about being at peace with yourself, being happy and content. I know my
Mm,
dad's always given me advice that the greatest thing you could ever achieve in life is contentment.
yeah,
And I think for the high achiever side of me, the workaholic side of me, is like, yeah, yeah, Dad, all right, all right. He told me
yeah.
years ago,
But
but actually, I think it is absolutely what life is all about. But
mm,
it takes the creation of environments that support that, I guess. It takes
yes,
intention from people like you. And one of the things that we do here, Jill, is we define first movers in a particular way. And for us, a first mover is someone who actively shapes the environments they're in. They're proactive and intentional about it. And they do
mm,
it so that the world can meet its full potential. First movers are those people who inherently know that someone has to be brave enough to be the first to go first, and they take it upon themselves to step up. So, with that in mind, how would you define being a first mover? What does it mean to you?
I think it's being driven by your purpose, and
Mm.
therefore the confidence that it takes to be first, that becomes almost the clarity, and it reduces that fear and the doubt of, is it okay for me to go first, because you're so driven by the
Mm,
need to put your hand up, or to knock on that door, or to say those words, because it's what you're all about.
mm,
And the need
Yeah.
and purpose is greater than the doubt of maybe someone else should go first.
mm.
Ooh.
Absolutely.
Oh, I
What do
love
you think,
that.
Cass?
I just want to dive into all of the bits now. So we break down first movers two into a framework: fueling growth, igniting courage, reframing relationships, shaping the status quo, and telling our story. So if you don't mind, we're gonna kind of do a tennis match with you and see
Okay.
what kind of brilliance you have to offer, because I'm on the edge of my seat. I have been the whole time. But when it comes to fueling growth, I guess, as you look at, that inflection point in your life and life number two, what has fueled your growth the most in that time?
It's having a clarity about life and
Mm.
who we are. I feel very clear
Absolutely.
about that.
That's amazing. It's a gift to have that clarity, I think.
It's both things. It's sort of when we see situations played back to us that
Mm,
aren't befitting of who we are, then
Mm,
it's the deep wound of that, but still holding on to saying, I know who we are. I know that our ability and capability is greater than this, and I'm
mm.
just waiting for that next evolutionary, you know, build.
Yeah,
So, yes, holding on to the clarity.
I love that. I think clarity is
mhm,
incredible. Now, when it comes to igniting courage, and we often say that courage is the predecessor to confidence, that confidence isn't a prerequisite, it's actually the result. So we should ignite courage within ourselves. For you, after experiencing such trauma and profound harm, what did courage look like for you moving into life number 2?
So it didn't feel courageous at all. It felt like the importance was to continue and continue with grace and with a sense of gratitude for all that had been given to me. So it was very symbolic. So I saw that my rebuilding of a second life was very symbolic for those that I wasn't able to ever say thank you to, and and to honor the incredible gift of life that I've had back. So to still be Jill, to still have the ability to smile and laugh, and there's not a moment that I am not grateful for that. And I live almost in the third person. And I like that because that gives me the ability to sit in awe of everything. Of Jill, how did you do that? How did you walk here? How do you balance? How do you keep talking? It just, that awe has been an absolute, enabler of me to keep pushing and to keep pushing and going ahead and continuing because I'm just in awe of my ability to do it.
I love that so much. I always think of on my happiest days, it's the days when I find wonderment in all of the small moments, whether it's, I'm just so grateful that the sun is on my face right now, or, oh, wow, that
Yes.
first sip of coffee, like,
Yes.
oh, I did the thing, I got out the door. Like, I love that, the awe, the wonderment. You're right. It's those little things, like
'Cause
you said
we're
earlier, the micro that
extraordinary.
adds.
We are
Yes.
extraordinary.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
When we think about that, even then, another great segue into the reframing of relationships. How have your relationships with yourself and other people changed in the last 20 years?
Incredibly. I've become the worst best friend. I'm admitting it because I can't do small talk anymore. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not at all bothered by the minutiae of life. So of course, dear friends that will come over and say, does my bum look big in these jeans, and I'll just say, yeah, it does. But if you don't like it, you've got the power to choose something else.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. Does it really matter? No.
Yeah.
What matters is what you're doing today to make different choices. If that's not making you happy, then make a different choice. Otherwise, live with who you are. And so it's been I've seen my world reduce a lot because that's actually quite lonely. Because I just want to have the big conversations. So the friendships that want to keep having the big conversations, I think they prepare themselves for it before they catch up with me because here we are, we're going to be talking about the big stuff. But that's been okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's quite simple in the end, and people do get so caught up in the small things, and that is the life lesson for all of us, right? How do we stop paying attention to the noise and focus on what is truly important? And I guess the gift of your experience has been that you are that way without any apologies. And I understand. I think when you've sort of crossed that barrier, going back, it can't. It's a point of no return in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Now, you, through your work, through your words, it's one thing that I've really observed talking to you today. You're very poetic in the way that you speak. You're emotive. You are an artist and a wordsmith. You shape the status quo in a number of ways. But I want to bring in that hard truth around violence and humanity and the fact that we are still experiencing terrible times. I mean, in recent times, in recent days, we've seen another example of that in our world. What old narrative about violence or humanity are you most driven to change?
I think it's othering. It's the other. the us,
Mm,
the them,
mm,
that they are to blame.
mm,
It's finding blame, it's needing to find blame, and I think it's one of the most challenging things to sit and hold a
Mm.
space and to try to hear the why. To
Mm.
try and
mm,
understand. So I used to use a technique that was very, effective, and, when I'd sit down with someone, particularly so I'd do, prison visits or sit with someone who was, holding an extreme view, and I would ask them to allow the space for us to meet each other with our sense of what the truth is. And I would draw, a big numeral, which was a number 6, and they're sitting across from me, and
mm,
I'd say, "Well, what is it you see?" And they said, "Well, I see a 9." I said, "Okay." And I'd flip
Mm.
the page around. I'd say, "I want you to appreciate that I am happy that you see that number, and now I'm seeing it, but equally, I want you to acknowledge and appreciate that I saw something very different, but that's
Mm.
still the truth. So that is
Yeah.
still that truth for us both, but we're seeing the truth from different angles." And that has helped sort of being able to find a position where you can have those
Mm.
difficult conversations and
Mm.
arrive and arriving at a place where you can agree to disagree can take, weeks, months,
Mm.
years.
Mm.
But it's being willing to
Mm.
break down the us versus them, because at one point in time, we are on that different side. I still feel that deep offense that a 19-year-old suicide bomber determined that I was his enemy without
Mm.
ever speaking to
mm,
me, that he put me in a bracket of the them and
Mm.
therefore
mm.
legitimized in his mind the reason to try and kill or maim me and all of my fellow commuters. So that lesson alone has helped me not be him
Mm.
and not
Mm.
make those conclusions, but try and approach everything with a sense of we are firstly human beings together,
Yeah.
and then trying to find the space to understand.
Gosh, it's so
I love that.
powerful.
As Yaz said, the way that you utilize language, the way that you tell your stories, the way that you leave space for that discomfort of paradox being actually, we can find common ground in that space where two truths that are seemingly opposing exist. You talked about going back to the folks who were so compassionate with you and they were the role models, and now you are the role model. So, how do you think that you sharing your
Mm.
story has helped others share theirs?
I don't know if it's helped others share theirs, and perhaps I will never know. I think that's again part of this me sitting with the you never know your impact. And I remember trying to make sense of that by writing down, that someone somewhere is feeling the effects of something you have said or done. And
Mm.
sometimes we just
Mm,
never know.
mm,
What I do hold dear is when I do get to have the feedback, and when my symbolism becomes the catalyst,
Mm.
and that's been important for communities to come together, particularly in the UK in the aftermath of the bombings, but equally subsequently since, when I've been
Mm.
able to just be in a space, and for
Yeah.
people to be so moved by my ability to not harbour bitterness or hatred,
Mm.
and to really listen to that and to work out, how that lead can make a difference to them. If they're
Yeah.
feeling
mm.
hatred, bitterness, how was the symbolism of my story helping
Mm.
them to equally embrace a life that is one of purpose and fulfilling, and the love that can be there after a terrible event, and to not, I won't say waste a life,
Mm.
to not spend the precious time that we have with the
Mm.
cancerous emotions of hatred and bitterness.
Gosh, that's so
Yeah.
true. I've a question for you, Jill. Do you believe in destiny? Do you believe that this was destiny for you?
So, look, this is a great thing for me to think about because I used to be that person
Yeah.
until I met Adrian's family. I completely then disagreed with the idea that we are destined for anything because I looked at these two beautiful kids that were left without their dad, and I thought, how can that be Adrian's destiny? How can this be their destiny? So I've now really reshaped my thinking, and I believe that things happen. Things
Yeah.
Unwanted change happens in different seismic ideas to us all the time. And actually it's tapping in to this incredible power that we have to choose how we react and how we respond. That's the point that no one can ever take away. And I think that's the real focus for me as the reminder for us all that we have this incredible power to choose how we react and how we respond.
Wow. I have a question really quickly. After you meet people for the first time, like say me and you today, how often does somebody just tell you that you are their absolute girl crush? Because
Not enough.
I think you got
'Cause
two
let me give
here
you that
today,
feedback.
Jill. Yeah. It's incredible. It's incredible. Yeah. I mean, well, look, we interview many people, Jill, but your story is just amazing. It's spine tingling. I think we have one final question.
Yes. Yes. This is a beautiful one. Jill, if you could finish the sentence for us. Peace begins when?
Peace begins when we stop thinking of it as an ideal and start treating it as a verb.
Wow. It's all about action. It's all about implementing the actions of good intention, of
That peace
not
is something
othering.
we do.
Absolutely.
Like love.
And
Exactly.
imagine being taught that as a young person.
Wow.
Peace is a verb.
Wow.
Gosh.
Wow.
There's so much in the curriculum that needs rewriting in terms of what truly matters for us as human beings. I mean, we've had nearly an hour of discussing this, and I hope everybody listening today is really taking that away, that it's all within our power, that we have control. You might be a person that believes in destiny somewhat or not, but what I'm taking away from our discussion is whether you're worried about your bum being big or whether you have to overcome an incredibly big trauma like you have, Jill, we all have a choice about our very next step, that next right step. If I reflect back to Anna in Frozen, even I remember watching that with my kids, just do the next right thing, the next right step, and you'd be amazed at what comes out of your life when you put intention in focus. Jill, thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
It's been incredible talking to you.
And you both. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.